I felt like God had forgotten about me because I felt like I'm looking at my life and it resembles the things that I had prayed for, but there still wasn't a piece. The changes that have been made, both internally, physically, externally, just everything that has changed about me has been because of July 11th and me truly saying, God, I'm giving you my 100% yes. And whatever else comes after that, that's what I'm going to do. Coming from the girl that had 3 suicide attempts and being the girl that should not have made it to 15, let alone 20, 21, and now 25, like that in and of itself is a miracle.
Wow.
I will do the thing that scares me the most. Somebody needs you here. Even if you don't want to be here for yourself, somebody needs you here. Stick around just for one more day. There's light somewhere, I promise.
Artrice, what's going on?
I'm good. How are
It's
you?
good to see you. I'm good. Thank you for traveling up here. I know you're going to be in town already.
Yes. Yeah.
But thank you you came from
DC.
From DC. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Listen, I'm excited about this conversation since our first time meeting. Well, you met my fiance first, and then we got to meet. And I'm like, we have to do this. But tell the people who you are and what you're about.
Oh my goodness, who am I? That's a weighted question to start. But no, I'm Artrice LaNae. I am a public relations executive in the entertainment and social impact industries. So do a lot of work around awards and just nonprofits and all of the amazing things. But at my heart, at my core, I'm a servant first and foremost, a child of God, an only child. That's who I am. Like, we'll probably get more into it, just all of the specificities around it, but that's just
of course
who I am. Yeah.
So you're kind of like me, where you have like a balance of creativity and you also do community impact. So I love that.
Yeah.
And you're spiritual and somebody who I can talk to about on that level.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Tell me about that journey.
That journey starts from as a child, right? Like, my parents grew up, like, raised me to be a part of the church. So I was in my choir when I was, I think, 12, and just growing up in church in the South. Like, that's just who I am at my core. And then, of course, you go through life, and then life starts lifing, and you start to figure out. It was, I think, the first time I really recognized I have to have a faith of my own. Like, my parents' faith does not carry me. So I have to develop that on my own. And what does that look like day to day, going through life and experiencing different things, experiencing grief? So I would say more recently has been like this reawakening, like a revival of some sort for me personally. Since July 11th, 2024. Like, I remember the day. Remember the exact day, the time, everything. I was sitting at my house, and I've had a relationship with God my entire life, like I said, growing up in the church. But it was really this weekend I felt like God was like, I need you to come to me. Like, I really need you to choose me today. Because if you don't choose me today, there might be some things that happen. And I need to know that you're going to choose me. And it was jarring. Like, when you have that type of encounter and it's just you, no one else is around, and you're like, wait, did I hear what I thought I heard? And then you start second guessing everything that you've done up until this point. Like, oh my goodness, the mistakes I could have made and probably did make. And so I watched a sermon by Priscilla Shirer, and 10 minutes into the sermon, bawling tears. Just everything she was saying was lining up with exactly where I was in my life and what I was feeling and how I felt like God had forgotten about me. Because I felt like I'm looking at my life and it resembles the things that I had prayed for, but there still wasn't a peace that I didn't have peace. I didn't have full joy in the way that I anticipated. And she, of course, was in War Room, the movie. So she mentions that in the sermon. So I went and watched it, and then completely broke down again watching the movie, just because it's so many things that were in my life at the time. And I made a choice in that moment. I was like, okay, God, it's me and you. Like, in a real way, like a sobering way of saying, I can't live for this world and still think that I can serve you. I can't. You can be in this world, but I can't be of this world. I can't be a part of a culture that does not honor you in everything that we do. So that was July 11, 2024. And since then, the 180 that my life has done has been, I don't even know if there are words. Like, it's been so many things. But I think the best thing has been I've had so much peace in anything that has come since then.
Right.
The changes that have been made, both internally, physically, externally, just everything that has changed about me has been because of July 11th and me truly saying, God, I'm giving you my 100% yes. And whatever else comes after that, that's what I'm going to do.
I love that. Let me ask you this, because I had the same experience.
Yes.
I did some things, and I remember having a few moments myself, and I'm like, man, how do I make myself get back to God? How do I get back to God? Right? And I'm sitting here like, man, everything I did, how would God want me back? You know what I mean? You know, and it's something I want to ask you about your experience. How did you find the grace to give yourself as you were trying to figure yourself out with your relationship with God and your spirituality?
I think the grace that I found was that I knew that He wanted me back. Like, I like that's, and I think part of that is just my foundational understanding of church and growing up a Christian. But I knew that, you know, you hear the story about the shepherd leaving the 99 for the one.
Right.
And so it was that I was like, but He wants me back.
Right.
Like He created me. He formed me, literally said, I want you to be in this world at this time, in this way, with all of the things that I've made you to be. I want you back. Like I don't think it ever crossed my mind that He didn't want me back. Right. It always crossed my mind that, but I'm too far. Like it always felt like, but Artrice, you can't just come back. You know what I mean? Like you can't just, His arms aren't just going to be open. Like, even though I knew He wanted me back, I think for me subconsciously, it was the feeling that, but I've done too much. I know He wants me back, but like, I got to fix myself before I come back.
I'm so glad that you're have a level of spiritual maturity. I do have to ask, how old are you? You don't mind me asking?
I'll be 25
You'll
on
be
the
25
first.
on the first. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Gotta say that.
Yes.
So I think you are rare. As somebody who's 25, I remember when I was 25, going through that journey of trying to get closer to God and myself too. How are you dealing with that in your circle? Is everybody on the same mindset wavelength, or are you having to shepherd others as you grow?
I think it's been a bit of both. If I'm being honest, part of just my entire being since I was a child has been a servant leader. Right. Like, and that word servant being first. I've always been the person serving others. And that's partly because of how my parents raised me. They both work in industries where they're in service to other people or something else or a project or whatever.
Right.
But I was always in my serving then chosen as the leader. So in a way it's been serving, but then still having to lead people, still having to...
As a result of showing yourself approved.
Yeah.
Or showing the discipline.
Yeah.
Got you.
And so I would say my friends are amazing. Like my friends have truly become my family. And they have been people that have covered me in prayer as much as I've covered them. Like I don't have people in my life that I can't pray with also. That used to be the case when I was younger. You know, you want a lot of friends and all these things. Yeah. And I have a solid village now that I don't have to worry about. Like if I just send them a text, hey, today hasn't been the best day. They're calling me within 10 minutes. Do we need to pray about it? Okay, let's pray. Then let's figure out the steps. So it's been a bit of both for me and my friends. Has been us shepherding each other, discipling each other, like leading each other, correcting each other. Like, you know, iron sharpens iron. That's not people hear that and they think, oh, that's great. And
some cliche.
Right. It's some cliche, but it's real when I'm calling you out on, that's not what you said you wanted to be though. Right. That's not who you've been called to be.
Right.
That's not the way you said you wanted to show up. And yet you're doing something different. So it's been a real, it's challenging at times because you're met with people that truly see you and not just see you as a person, but like see you who you are in God, who you are in Christ. And so they are challenging you to step up to the plate, to be who God has called you to be. And sometimes that's not a pretty picture when you just want things to go your way. So in my friends, I would say we shepherd each other, and it has been probably one of the most fruitful things and aspects of my life, just because I know that they're also steeped in the word. Like I know that they're also steeped in the ways of living for God in a way that's pleasing to him. So
I got to ask, and you can share as much as you want, what are they challenging you to be now in terms of knowing your calling in some regard?
That's good. That's really good. They're challenging me to step out in front of like doing the things that I know I should be doing.
Like being here?
Literally being here, because again, serving is my attitude, is my posture.
Right.
Both literally and figuratively. So I've been okay and still am very okay with being the person behind the scenes, with being the person in the production room, figuring things out, being the person, for some of my friends, going over their budgets with them and figuring out a plan and a strategy and making the phone calls and setting up the meetings and fixing the hair. Like I've been the person in the background making sure things run smoothly so that the final product can be out, right? So now they're pushing me to like, no, God called that within you to be out in the front.
Right.
And so you can still serve, but in your serving now you also have to be in front.
Right.
And I think for the longest time, I wasn't looking at being in the front as a version of serving still. I thought like, no, God wants me to serve in the background, and that's fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. But also, Artrice, you have to be in the forefront now. Your testimony has to be used, has to be shared, has to be heard. And so you can't do that from the booth,
Can I share something with you?
Yeah.
And I never talked about this before, but even with me creating content, I used to just write stuff. Like I got some stuff right here I wrote down.
Yes.
Right. I used to just put up that. That's how I got a lot of my following. Instagram changed the algorithm. Now you got to make videos.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And I started to be like, you know what? I'm not a slave to the algorithm and all this other stuff. But it's like, then you're not showing up in that territory.
Yeah.
Right. And then that means if you're a vessel for God, or you have a certain message you need to share that God can work through, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so it becomes kind of like you're saying, hey, I don't care about the game.
Right.
Right. And it's like, God's like, hey, we playing the game. We understand that. And so you can't be so high and mighty that you're not willing to put the work in on this level because it's uncomfortable or something different. I had to have a conversation with Jeanette, and it was a really decisive moment of like, I'm about to just go ahead. I know stuff comes with being out there, but I have to, like, we have to be out there. I said, hey, you don't have to do too much.
Right.
I'll create the content. Your page got to be private, so I don't want nobody, coming over there and doing nothing over there, and I'll get out of my character trying to defend you. So I'm like, let me just be out here and properly play the game, right? And it's, it's not about us. I had to realize that too. It's like, hey, you got to go out here and do what you got to do. And I had to tell myself, man, that's what I learned just over time. We don't quantify how many people don't get touched by us not doing that, right? We don't see all the folks that could potentially be led to God or just be encouraged in whatever moment they're in from us actually doing the work that we saying, hey, I'm not going to dive too much into it yet.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, do you ever imagine all the folks you can help and then kind of look at it in a different angle and say, hey, if I don't actually start doing the work, none of those imaginary right now people get that support?
Absolutely. 110%. And it's always funny when you look back over your life, right? At things. My friends have always said this. My parents have always said this. I've been very wise at a young age, right?
Yep.
For whatever that means for different reasons. Yeah. But I used to always tell my friends, and this is when I was in undergrad, I would always tell them, like, you realize if you don't follow what God has put on the inside of you, other people can't get to what they have to get to.
Right.
I would tell them that.
Wow.
And then not recognize that applies to you too, Artrice.
Can I say something to that? Because I had to learn this too. That is God talking through you in real
Yes.
time. And
Yes.
so what people miss out on, we get so prideful about the fact that it came out of our mouth that we don't realize, hey, you need to receive that too.
Yeah.
Once it's out there, make sure you actually can apply
Yes.
that. And this is why a lot of people don't always dwell to lean towards preachers who aren't about what they say, because the preacher can be the mouthpiece and still not apply it to their life. And then we look at the preacher and put them on a pedestal and we're like, oh man, you're not applying that. Why should I listen to anything you hear?
Yeah.
Anything you're saying? Because they're not saying it. That's God. They're not applying it either.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
but you have to still try to take the message. The wisdom can come out of that, and you actually can take that and apply it to your life. So I want to just make sure of that point.
Yeah. And I've noticed that has been the theme in my life. Has been God has spoken things through me way ahead of time before I could recognize, I needed to also receive that and understand that and apply it to my own life. So, which is why I think it's hilarious for me just in my life. I use the saying of like, God loves to have a kiki with me. Like he really, really does. He loves to, I feel like he just be looking at me like just laughing. I feel like I give him a hearty laugh every other day. And it's because he uses me so frequently and I think I don't recognize it all the time. And I'm starting to understand it now because I'm really trying to figure this life out, right? But before, I mean, just things that I would say as a kid and things that people would be like, but how do you know this? Like I would always, family members have always told my parents, like, she's been here before. Like she just, there's a wisdom about her. She doesn't, and I can't count it as my own. Like, it's not like, at 6, I had all of these life experiences. I was just saying stuff, but I recognize even then that was God saying, I'm using you.
Right.
But I think it hasn't been until recently that I've actually been receiving it myself and saying, okay, recognizing that it's God speaking and he's also speaking to me. He's not just speaking to the person that I'm talking to in real time, but also, Artrice, this is for you to store up for later as well.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, me and Jeanette coined that as like a seed of understanding. Because we had that same moment. And we have it with a lot of people who I say are on the same team. Like we think you're on the same team. You know what I mean? And so I feel like a lot of us go through these life experiences and then, I think some of us forget that didn't come from actual experiences that we've had all the time, right? It's like, all right, like you said, I am too young to have this much wisdom or to have this come out my mouth.
Yeah.
That is God saying, I'm leaving a seed. You still got to water it. You still have to seek me, right? And over time, as you have experiences, if you do the wise thing, it builds up. You know what I mean? And you can actually be in this world in a natural way, looking, smarter than you should be and all that other good stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think that a lot of us who are on the same team have that experience where it's like, hey, for some reason, when I was this young, like my grandmother,
understand it.
my grandmother asked me what to be when I was 13. I literally sat there and I projected myself into the future. Like, I'm like, all right, I'm on my deathbed. What do I care about? At 13, I'm like, what would I care about? I could feel every essence of my decision-making process. I'm like, all right, if I had money, cool. All right, that ain't that crazy. If I played basketball, that ain't that deep. If I helped other people, I'm like, man, that's something about that feel good. I said, all right, I want to help other people. I'm like, who or what profession does that the most? At the time, I'm like, hey, politics. It's before Barack Obama. I'm like, I want to be the first black president, right? And that decision guided my natural experience. I started to really find ways of joining the SGA, all the other good stuff.
Right.
But that's not normal. You know what I mean? A lot of kids, we out here just trying to enjoy ourselves and learning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But that seed of understanding allowed me to have a moment like that and then, gauge the rest of my life. Not to say I didn't fall short several times.
Right.
But I appreciate that. You know what I mean?
100%.
All right. So we talked about your spirituality and your journey with that. Definitely tell us more about your professional life outside of your 9 to 5.
Yeah. Outside of my 9 to 5, I have a production company called 752 Productions, television, film, theater. And then God gave me this seed of grace and grit about 7 years ago. Okay. Officially 7 years ago. So, of course, 7 being the number of completion, that this thing is now fully seen its full harvest, if you will. Right. And
you got to explain that. Explain that concept.
Yeah. So grace and grit, I'm not joking. I was in my dorm room And I had a conversation previously with some other friends at my college at the time. And they were talking about, Artrice, you should start a podcast. And so I did. I did a podcast for college readiness and preparing for college.
Right.
And just all of the things, scholarships that you need to have, and studies, tips and tools and applications, all the things. And then midway through that process, God was like, yeah, but Grace and Gray. And I was like, another podcast? Like, I don't want to do another podcast. Like, I've done, and that's already a lot. You're a full-time college student. I'm recording myself. I'm editing myself. Like, that's a lot.
Full-time job. Yeah.
Right, full-time job. And I was like, okay, so what do you want me to do with Grace and Grit? And so I just kind of put it on the back burner. Pandemic, of course, happened, and 2020 was a very difficult time for my family and a lot of our immediate friends of family because of course, the deaths that happened and cascaded across the country, but then also deaths that just happened in our family. And so we were attending a lot of funerals in 2020, and I kind of felt like, God, you have got to change this thing around. Like, there has to be something else. And so I started doing these Instagram lives at the time. Right. Had never done an Instagram live before this period, so I'm feeling very out of my element.
Right.
And of course, still the person that likes to be behind the camera serving. So now you have me on camera. Sir, what what are you trying to do? What are you trying to show me? And so started just kind of talking about my experience. I would just pick a scripture throughout my devotionals from the week and just talk about it.
Right.
And then Grace and Grit came up again. And so I was like, so at this point, it's a couple years later, maybe 3 years. And I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing with this? Still don't fully understand. And the only thing I had to reference was like, okay, a podcast. I was so afraid that by 2021, I moved to DC. And I was like, but I don't want to do this podcast by myself. Like, afraid of my own being, to the point where I was like, I was trying to pitch this podcast to other people to say, don't you want to do this? Like, doesn't this sound great? And I had laid everything out. I had talked about the different topics. Yeah. And everybody was like, they were interested. They were like, yeah, that sounds great, but I don't think we should be talking about it. And I was like, okay, fine. So I got my producing partner, who's also like my sister. And so I was like, hey, I have this idea for this podcast. Right. And nobody else wants to take it. Yeah, so I think we should do it together. She said, okay, great. And she's someone that I like truly, truly trust. So when she signed on, I said, great, I can do this, because at least it's not just me in front of the mic. And we did our first season, and it was great. We had amazing feedback, and we took a hiatus. And I was like, okay, I know this has to come back. Right. And so July 11th, 2024, I'm having this crazy encounter with God in my home, bawling, crying. Everything from 2023, like, just had surmounted to this point. And I spilled everything out onto paper. Just an overflow of ideas and things to talk about, and really understanding what Grace and Grit was. And he was like, you have to do this. Yep. I called you. I didn't call, as much as I love my sister, I didn't call Marche to do this. I called you to do this. So either you pick up your cross and you walk today with what I gave you, or you don't do it at all. Right. And I was like, okay.
And that's a real thing. Because if you don't do it, somebody got to do it.
He's going to give it to somebody else. Yep. And so I said, okay. And so I'm writing out all of these things about what the podcast is, about eventually other things that it'll grow to be. And so now understanding Grace and Grit. Grace has always been the word that has stuck with me since I was young. Right. Coming from the girl that had 3 suicide attempts and being the girl that should not have made it to 15, let alone 20, 21, and now 25. Like, that in and of itself is a miracle. Wow. And knowing that and seeing that, Grace has always been the thing. It was literally the first tattoo I got that says Grace. And it's 2 Corinthians 12:9. Your grace is sufficient. Right. Your grace is sufficient in my weakness. And so I was like, God, your grace has covered me. But this life is so gritty. This life requires me wants me to do things that I don't want to do, requires me to go out of my way, requires me to be stronger than I really am at times, requires me to break down, like this life is gritty. Your grace is covering me, but this thing you've put me in is gritty. There's no other way to put it. And he was like, but I'm going to give you the tools to get through it. I'm going to give you the tools to get through the grittiness. And you're going to have to put in some grit of your own to work through it. My grace is always going to cover you. My grace is always going to be sufficient. But I also need to know that you'll partner with me in working through the things that challenge you and working through the difficulties in your life and working through trying to make sense of a world that really is chaotic right now. Like, I will give you those things, but I need to know that you trust me first. And so that is what Grace and Grit is what I'm birthing now, is like this new iteration of Grace and Grit.
And I'm excited for you. Let me affirm you, right? Because there's so many signs of alignment. Because now that you broke it down, I could tell the whole story.
Yeah.
So when you and Jeanette were talking
at
AJ and Jasinia's engagement party,
actually,
I'll let you tell that. How did that play out and then into the Grace and Grit conversation?
Yeah. So, by the way, love Jeanette. Shout out to Jeanette.
Shout out to my fiance. What's up, baby?
Yes. I didn't know Jeanette at all. She was talking to another friend of AJ and Jasinia's who I had met. Right. And so they were in a conversation. So I went over to hug her and then met Jeanette. And I was like, hi. So then we all just sort of started talking. We sat down on the couch and I'm just telling them about, at that point, from July 11, 2024 to now September of what has gone on. And Jeanette, being amazing, was just like affirming me and everything. Yeah. And I was like, I know that I now have to step back into a more visible role with Grace and Grit and doing this podcast that really, really scares me. And she paused. Like, she just was like, what did you just say? And I was like, Grace and Grit. And she was like, I need you to meet my fiance. Hold on one second. And so then we just kept talking, and then you came in and at this amazing, which, by the way, like, AJ and Jasinia's engagement party was amazing. It was lit. It was all love. Yeah, love it. Absolutely amazing. Yeah. And we went outside in the hallway. Everybody's on the dance floor.
Yeah, we had a whole deep conversation. But before we get to that, let me just say why she was. You know this, but for everybody else, why she was so excited. We had talked about Grace and Grit for a while. Mm-hmm. Like, I had brought that up. I got the same call, right? In a different regard, right? Because I know it's not my entire responsibility. I know it's not something I'm supposed to be pushing heavily, but I know the concept. Like, I can see it in you. I can see the relevancy of it. I understand it even in our community, right? Yeah. And so I actually had a conversation even on this podcast talking about Grace and Grit. Mm-hmm. And so when she heard you say it, she's like, no way. Yeah. Because nobody packages that like that. Yeah. I think it's probably me and you right now that I know that said it like that, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we started talking, I could feel the spirit working so clearly, because I'm like, okay, you're obviously supposed to be helping this person. There's no happenstance that y'all in the same party, not knowing each other, that you end up talking to Jeanette, that you bring up Grace and Grit to the right person, right? Mm-hmm. And then now we're sitting here on a podcast, right? That is how I know we're on the same team. Yeah. Right. And I think we've gotten to that level of spiritual maturity to be able to see those signs of alignment and react with God to the whole partnership concept a lot quicker over the years. And this was one of those moments where you were talking, and I think for one of the first times I felt like a spiritual brother, a big brother, like, hey, you make sure you hold it down. Yes. You already know how the plays go. Yeah. You make sure she understands whatever she needs to understand that you can give her, that you're supposed to give her. Make sure she get the visibility you can give her and actually go hard to do it. And I'll say that was even encouraging for me, because, to be honest, I don't have to do this. You know what I mean? Like, this is literally, I'm just doing this because it costs thousands of dollars. Yes. Hold it down. I still love y'all, by the way. Yes. Shout out to the podcast studio. Yes. But I know there is more than just me creating content. Mm-hmm. You need to have your mouthpiece. Whoever else I talk to needs to have their mouthpiece, right? And that conversation with us was such an encouraging moment. So I'm like, you need to go hard. I don't care if you got a great job, making good money. This is still relevant towards a mission that's bigger than you. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so thank you for helping affirm that for me. And also just know I'm here for you. I know the concept of Grace and Grit, to your whole breakdown just now, is needed. like our culture, and I told a story about somebody I worked with in Harlem and how I had to learn that even in my professional work, where it's like I'm helping our community most of the time, and we have some struggles, and that comes with a level of rigor that means you can't be soft. You know what I mean? You can't be easy to break down.
Yeah.
But you still have to be empathetic. So there's literally the grace and the grit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there gets into the spiritual concept, right? It's a lot of stuff going on just culturally that challenges our spirituality or our attempt to really embody God's work and the fruits of the Spirit. And to defend that, we need grit. In the same breath, we got to give grace.
Listen.
Cannot be judgmental towards yourself, towards anybody you're engaging with, towards an environment. But you also have to set boundaries, you know, in love and all that other good stuff. So before I start preaching,
I just
want to lay that out in terms of watching that. Was so excited.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think one of the things, like I replay that night so often because of where I was at that time.
Right.
I had really, like, maybe, I'm not joking, maybe a couple of days before really had said, okay, God, yes. Like, I will do the thing that scares me the most.
Yep.
Yes. And the very next question I had was, but how? Like, with what team, with what resources, with what audience? Like, at that point, I had been off of social media since May. Right. So I wasn't even tapped into trends and whatever else was going on. Right. And it did feel like that, like from both you and Jeanette, like these spiritual big brothers and big sisters of saying like, no, we're going to hold your hand and walk with you through this. Like this has to be done. Right. And so we're going to help you see it through. And I don't think up until that point I had probably had like maybe one other person who has been with me throughout this entire journey. She's been amazing to just been a guide and a support and like really keeping me focused and encouragement. But then when you two stepped in, I mean, I called her immediately and I was like, this just happened. Like all of these things. Cause she and I had just talked about what Grace and Grit, the podcast, was going to be and all of the different iterations that it can be of growing and building an audience and building a platform that actually helps provide people tools and tangible resources. Like, it has
to be practical.
Practical. You know what I mean? Like your day to day, it sounds great to say, yeah, you need God's grace and it gets gritty. But the reality is like, okay, I'm going to open up this Bible, read a scripture, and then what do I have to do? Right. Like, you know what I mean? I still got to go to work. I still got to figure out this thing. I still got to put money in my, in my bank account, whatever the case is. So having you to affirm everything that I felt like I had been feeling and what God had been saying, I don't think people understand that because at least for me, it hasn't been until recent. I hadn't gotten many signs of like confirmation of saying, yes, God told you that. Right. And I believe personally, people aren't necessarily going to reveal things to you. I believe God confirms things through other people for you. Right. Right. And so he had told me all of these things, but I'm like, I'm gonna need you to confirm that because you're telling me these things and I'm giving you my yes and I'm gonna walk this thing out until you say otherwise. But this looks very like you realize what you're asking me to do, right? Like you're asking me to do these things. And right now, my current life doesn't represent what you say I'm about to have. So what's this in between part?
Ain't that always how it is though?
Yeah. It's always like, what do you mean? Yep. What do you mean? So from A to B, I see how B exists and I love how B looks. Yeah, yeah. But right now, A. Yep. Right now in A, I have a job. Right now in A, I'm trying to figure out a budget. But you're saying B, I get to be financially stable? Mm-hmm. A means, I'm working through things. I'm working through challenges and relationships. But B, I have peace. Right. Like, how do we get there? And I didn't know. I didn't know, and nor did I feel like I had a team or I had a support system. So I felt like, God, you're really calling me to do this on my own. Mm-hmm. And that is scary when you, again, are the person that I want to be behind the scenes. I don't want to be seen anyway. And now you got to tell me I have to be seen?
Hey, I got to hop in because there's so much I want to talk about,
please. Yes.
It's too many areas. I got the last point, though, is like that test of faith is real. Mm-hmm. Nonstop, especially as you grow. Yes. I had to get it really had to get embedded in me.
Yeah.
Where stuff comes up now, like stuff happened recently, and I'm like, it's on rinse and repeat at this point. I'm like, hey, I don't know how to, but listen, I got you. I'm there. What's my job?
Exactly.
That's my one step. Thank you.
Exactly.
And when I tell you, he meet you and then send you flying, you thinking you a turtle? Like, nah, I need you to fly now. Thank you for just doing that little bit. That's all I needed from you. You know what I mean? And then you're gone, right?
Yeah.
And I seen that so much. I had to stop myself from making it a habit to fast because I started to see the results so quickly. Me and Jeanette started to see how quick it was happening, and I made it ritualistic. And I had to pray against that. I'm like, oh, no, it's too easy now. I don't even feel that I'm sacrificing anything. I had to say, you know what, nah, babe, we're not doing it. Because we started doing it every month. First 7 days. I'm like, first 7 days, now we're doing it we did 21 days, we did a 40-day day you fast. I'm like, you know what, let's do it every month. Started doing that, and we kept seeing the results. Then my spirit hit me at a certain point. I think it was like almost the third year we were doing it. I'm like, yeah, I don't feel the same no more. They don't feel like I'm doing this with like that transaction with God. I don't feel like I feel it's too easy to do this. I had to tell him, like, babe, you know what? We're going to have to discern consistently when we're supposed to fast. Because I don't want to get so good at doing this that it's actually not good anymore.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I said to say, I've seen the work happen so much that when the stuff comes up in culture, it's like, let me just do my part, mind my business. How is not my concern at this point. I know there's going to be a level of stewardship and maturity required to look over certain things and make sure I'm not just being lackadaisy and negligent.
Right.
But once it's something I know is of God, I'm not going to sit here and try to do the math and make the route. It's like, no.
Because it's not going to make sense anyway.
It's not. And then you can't imagine it properly.
At all.
The way we're here, I wouldn't know you. I'm like, who are you?
There's no reason we should be sitting here. It's like, so it's things like that I'm like, oh, you're aligning A, B, and C.
Right.
And I didn't even know C existed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You couldn't imagine. So I want to touch on that. Then the other thing was, I love the fact that and this is how I know it's of affirmation too, because a lot of people don't have the self-accountability and accountability to our community and anything that we do to say, nah, it has to be practical. I'm tired of just saying grace. I'm tired of just saying, look at the Bible. I'm tired of just saying this. What's the practicality? And then let's actually do it. Right. And I tell you that in the same, like, I'm in a space where I'm trying to do that in my circle. So I'm like, yo, that sound good. Okay, that's a nice verse. Great. Respect that. I love that.
Yeah.
How are we applying that in culture today? Because it don't work the same as it did before. And I'm sorry, we can't be that lazy where we don't keep evolving with these things to play the right. Same conversation about me being on social media in certain ways. Like, we got to still evolve and play the game. If we're going to say we're actually reclaiming territory, we're actually showing up in a certain way.
Yeah.
How do you show up as Christ in culture, right? What is the curriculum that we actually have to help other people understand this is how gritty it is now, and this is how you can show up in these scenarios? It's not going to be, actual, like every single scenario, but let's give some kind of context that goes beyond just the theoretical. You know what I'm saying? So I respect you doing that.
Yeah.
Did you start to dwell in that space yet, figuring out, all right, what are the case studies we can use, and how do we actually go about sharing this message or this principle?
Yeah, I think you say case study, and I'm like, I was the case study. I genuinely felt like God was like, I'm going to work it out through you so you know how to communicate it out to others. Right. And so for me, it was from, like I said, May, I had gone off of social media, which, by the way, in and of itself, when I think about it now, I'm like, you had me disconnect from the world 2 months before you really talked to me. Like, he didn't talk to me until July. Right. So from May to June, I was still fine. You know what I mean? Like, relatively speaking, it wasn't until July that I had that encounter. And so, and my friend explained it to me so perfectly. She was like, Artrice, you're in a period of consecration. Like, you have to be, it has to just be you and God. Yep. You have to be in the wilderness right now, because whatever he's trying to reveal to you, you cannot have distractions from the world. You cannot have people saying one thing and you thinking another. Like, you have to be in tune with him, and you have to be sensitive to when the Holy Spirit is moving. Right. And so for me, it was God really saying, I'm removing everything. Right. I'm removing everything so that, when I'm speaking, you hear me clearly, because you've had too many distractions that you don't even know what I sound like anymore. Yep. So I think I was a case study. I think he was like, I'm working everything out. And I'm not joking, from July 11th till now has been something every day.
Yep.
Like something working out in me every single day. I'm learning something new every single day. I got into a point probably 2 weeks after the July 11th encounter. And I remember asking God, I was like, you know, I'm single. I think I'm relatively a kind person. I was like, where's my person? Where's, you know, I'm trying to date, trying to figure out these things. Right. And he was like, you're asking for things that you don't even have the tools to steward yet. He was like, you're asking for a family, yet you don't steward yours that I gave you.
Real.
And not just your biological family, your chosen family.
That's real.
He was like, you say that you, quote unquote, are ready for kids, but what do you think really happens and comes with having children?
Right.
Like, and he quickly brought to my memory my mother and my father and my grandparents praying over me, praying for me. When I'm asleep at night, praying over me. Before I was even born, praying over me. He was like, this is an everyday thing for them.
Right.
You're not ready for that. You don't even have that level of discipline yet. So how can I trust you with kids and you don't even have a level of discipline of praying over your own family? And so that was probably the first thing he taught me was you have to steward and water and nurture the garden I've given you.
Right.
And that means whatever is in your life that is valuable to you right now, whether that's, you know, your significant other, your friends, your family, whoever, you have to nurture that now.
Right.
And so go ahead.
Every time we talk, I'm trying to contain myself, man.
No, yes.
Because it's too much.
Yeah.
I got to just lean into that because, be faithful over few, right?
Yes.
What I noticed is that a lot of us make these things so difficult. Mm-hmm. What God tells us is very simple from the beginning of the time. Yeah. But across the board, we take these principles and make them so complicated, and culture makes it feel more complicated. Mm-hmm. It distracts us with these other things that look shiny and look great. It's like, oh man, I want it like that. And so you start doing things that you shouldn't be doing to get to that. Even though if you did the thing that was already supposed to be done, you would get that.
Yeah.
All these things of the world that are still within God, right? And I had to learn that. And from learning that, when I tell you that's also embedded, I had to start telling myself, like, we know, me and Jeanette know, at some point we have to start outsourcing. Like small stuff, so like around the crib, laundry, you know, helping with cleaning. You know, like at a certain point, we got to start paying for that. But I'm not at that point yet.
Right.
So I had to humble myself. I'm like, yo, I don't care how busy I am. I got a system in place. I don't care how small that thing. I'm gonna put it in the right priority where I'm not just over like doing something lesser than what I should be doing at the time. But I'm gonna get these dishes done.
Listen,
this garbage gonna get taken out. This laundry's gonna get done. You know what I mean? The house gonna look clean. And I'm gonna make sure Jeanette's still doing her part in that because she a lawyer, so she be forgetting a lot of stuff. No offense, babe. I gotta stay on top because I'm like, if you're faithful over a few, more comes, right? And then you have to figure out how to build a system to be faithful around that. But if you don't start with what you got, of course nothing more is gonna come. So it's like, to your point of even being faithful over your family, your community, I had to do the same thing. I had to realize, I'm like, I need to show up better for my family. I had to pray for that. I'm like, help me be better for my family. Help us be better for each other, right? Whatever I need to be, whatever I need to do, if I need to give more patience, I need to give more time or less time. If I need to build boundaries to show a standard, if I need to show me how to do that so I can show up in a certain way. And I watched how everything changed as I did that better. I watched how it became an example. You know what I mean? But if I'm not faithful, to your point earlier, how do I give a case study?
Listen.
You know what I'm saying?
And to your point about just being a good steward over the little.
Right.
One of the first things I remember hearing in that Priscilla Shirer sermon was that you have to treat the mundane things like they're the big things. You have to. You're asking for $1 million, but you don't even budget $100.
Right.
You're asking for the team, but you can't even properly communicate.
I can't, Artrice, you doing too much to me. Listen, it's crazy. Like, I literally just told somebody the other day, fall in love with the mundane. That same word. I said, fall in love with the mundane.
And I told a friend this a couple of days ago of you have to treat the small things like they are the big blessings.
Right.
You have to, because you're asking for the big blessing and you're missing all of the small blessings he's giving you. You're missing all of the small opportunities he's giving you to work out the things that you don't fully understand yet. Like, so that was me working that out. He was like, you're asking for this big blessing of eventually a healthy marriage and a family and children and all of these things. And yet your friends are struggling and you haven't prayed for them. So then the first thing he told me, he was like, fast for them. And it's one thing to fast for yourself. It's another thing to fast for others. And I wasn't doing it looking for a pat on the back, a round of applause. I was doing it, again, out of my heart posture of being a servant.
You're in my head. My response to that is going to be, that's your heart posture. That's the required heart posture. You know what I mean?
You have to be in that posture to be able to be of service in that way. And so for my friends, I went on a 30-day prayer fast. Since August, I've been doing a prayer fast for one friend. And that has been not for one particular friend, but like different friends. So one time it was a 30-day fast. The next one has been 21 days. And I write out every single prayer and then I give them the prayers. And what's been so wild to see has been them going through the prayers after I've given them. And they're like, how did you know that happened? I'm like, I don't know. Like, you know, we talk, but I'm like, you didn't tell me, you know, everything or what was happening during that time in your life. Literally one friend, I wrote a couple of, like, maybe the fourth day, I wrote, God bless any new doors she steps through and bless her home. A couple of days later, she calls me. She signed on a home I didn't even know that she was signing on. And I had already prayed for it. I had already so you don't, I realized that God was trying to show me, I need you to be faithful over the things I've given you. And the things I've given you are friends that need you right now. You have to be the prayer warrior. I legit remember years ago saying, God, I want to be a more ferocious prayer warrior. And he was like, well, how do you think you're going to do that and you don't pray now? You have to start now. Like you have to. And so it's not just praying over myself. It's very, very rare nowadays that I pray for myself solely. Like I'm always, we talked about this the other day. I get up at 3 a.m. praying for other people. Get up at 3 a.m. Why are they on my mind? Okay, I'm going to just start praying. Playing worship music. I remember one time I was driving to go get coffee. And I'm listening to songs, whatever, and immediately God put this person on my mind. And it's like a 10, 15-minute drive. That entire drive, I'm praying for them. They call me maybe 20 minutes after I prayed. They were like, this big thing just happened. And I'm like, that's what I was praying for. I had no idea.
And man, and this is the stuff that you can't talk to everybody about because you just don't get it. The level of spiritual maturity required to understand this and to understand how real it is and how much of a blessing it is to be that kind of vessel is next level.
And a responsibility, though.
It is. It is.
And that's the thing that I think I'm entering into now. The responsibility, the weightiness of it. Because, like you said, everybody doesn't get it. Everybody doesn't get to be used as that sort of vessel. I believe a lot of people can be vessels for many different things. Of course. But for that particular assignment, that particular calling, that particular gift really requires a level of selflessness. And it requires you're going to be weighty. Like it just is. I'm like, there's a lot more times I'm weighty about things that my friends are going through. Like I feel that. And I used to think, you know, as a kid, I was just like, oh, I'm just sensitive. I'm an empath, right? And the reality is he's like, no, I made you sensitive to the spirit. I made you sensitive to the things going on around you because I need you to know you need to be on your knees praying. You have to be at my altar. You have to seek my face. You have to. And I used to ask him like, God, but why does it have to be me? Like you're waking me up at 3 a.m. for somebody else. But the selflessness that requires of me to, again, have that heart posture to say, but I'll do it anyway. I'll give you my yes anyway. I will. If I have to wake up at 3 a.m. every day for the next 2 weeks, I'll do it. Because whatever you're doing in their life requires me to be on my knees so that they can get their blessing. I'll do it. I don't want to be responsible for holding up someone else's blessing. I don't want to be responsible for not allowing somebody else. Like, it requires a maturity. It requires an understanding of this responsibility is yours.
Right.
And so I had to stop looking at it as this burden and really start looking at it as like, oh, but God trusts me.
Yep. And that's the piece right there.
Like he trusts us to do this. He trusts us to cover other people. He trusts us to set the standards and set the practices in place for the generations to come. Like the amount of times I've prayed for my future grandchildren that, 4 generations removed, I'll probably never meet them. Like just things like that I'm like, I'm setting the precedent in place. And then thinking about, but my grandmother set it in place for me. So that's why even when I've strayed, I've still had, I'm like, but I know he's here somewhere. I know he wants me back. So God, how do I find you again? Like it's always been there because she set the precedent in place. Praying over me when my mom was pregnant saying, but this child will be different.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so much I want to dive into. You do need the podcast because there's so many angles we can go.
I
just want to give you a second, and I don't know what you may be able to say, but I did hear you say you went through 3 suicide attempts, right? And now you're here today.
Yeah.
Right. So if you could imagine someone else who may be in that situation right now, also similar age maybe, to think back to what you would have needed to hear, what would you tell them? You could take a second.
Yeah. I think one of the things I did hear during that time, and this was, I think this was the second attempt. I remember somebody telling me, well, what if tomorrow it's okay? Like, what if tomorrow everything is just okay, magically, right? And not that it magically was okay the next day, but there was a level of hope. And I think sometimes when you're in that space, at least for me, it was, I didn't have any hope. Like I didn't have any hope for anything. I didn't have any hope that it would be okay. I didn't have any hope that things would work out for me. I didn't have any hope that anybody would care. Like when you get to that space, and it's a very specific dark place, and I know people don't always understand it if they haven't been through it, but when you get to that space, it's very hard to come out. It's hard to see a glimpse of a light.
Right.
And so to see that again, you have to have hope just a little bit. So I would say to somebody experiencing that or in that same space, it works out in the end. It may not look like how you want it to look like, and the ways that you think it should happen or the timing in which you think it should happen, but it works out in the end. So stick around just for one more day, just to see if it does change. And then stick around for another day. Like stick it out until, and I know that might even sound just like you're pushing that aside, but I understand what that space is. It's a very specific, dark place that requires a lot to even just, like I said, see a glimpse or a glimmer of hope or a light. And so I would ask them, I would pray, please just stick around one more day. Somebody is affected if you're not here. Somebody is going to be asking questions if you're not here. Somebody is going to be crying if you're not here. Somebody is going to be struggling if you're not here. Somebody needs you here. Even if you don't want to be here for yourself, somebody needs you here. And then find a way to then find your own joy again. Find a way to have your own peace again. It's not easy by a long shot. I would also say utilize your community. If you only have one person, utilize them and be honest. A lot of times when I was in that space, you would have looked at me and you wouldn't have known. I hid it very, very well.
Bro.
It's not something that a lot of people can pinpoint unless they've been there. I can look at people. There's a certain glaze over your eyes that I can see because I know what that is. But not everybody is in tune with that. So utilize your community. Really, really, because I wish I would have been honest with people. When they ask me, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm fine. You know, school's going great. Da, da, da. I'm okay. Utilize the people that you know genuinely care. Like, obviously use discernment, but the people that you know care, the people that you know love you and want you here, be honest with them. And it's not easy. That space is hard. That space is very, very difficult. So I would just say stick around just for one more day. There's light somewhere, I promise. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Listen, when is Grace and Grit coming back? Let us know how to find you, where we should be expecting.
Grace and Grit is coming back. Grace and Grit, the podcast, will be back on all streaming platforms January 1st, 2025.
Oh, so it's set. You already got it scheduled.
Yes, it's set.
Let's go.
The first episode will come out January 1st, 2025. So it'll be every Wednesday. Nice. I'm excited. There's a lot of things with it that are coming, not just the podcast, so other tools and resources and things. So I'm very, very excited. So you can find all of the social media platforms of just Grace and Grit Pod, all one word. Instagram, Facebook, X/Twitter, all of the things, and then anywhere you stream your podcast.
Okay. And as you know, I'm here. Jeanette is here.
Yes.
Going to be supporting you any way we can. So listen, it's all love.
Yes,
I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Don't procrastinate yourself into a regretful life.